Colleagues and ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the subcommittee hearing this morning. We're dealing with an interesting issue, and we have two panels of witnesses that we will proceed to expeditiously. As we meet this morning, a nuclear power plant or a hazardous waste site or a oil refinery or a chemical plant is most probably being guarded by a person who's an employee of a private company. And the men and women who serve in that capacity broadly, almost uniformly, I would say, do a very, very good job. They're competent, they're qualified, they're honest, they're hardworking, they're doing a very good job defending our country. But we don't know if all of them fit that description because there are holes in the system that does background checks on people that have such a critical responsibility. The Department of Homeland Security has identified that 85% of the critical infrastructure of our country is owned by private sector firms who almost always use private sector security firms to provide their security. So how would we know if the person gathering or the person who is guarding that hazardous waste site or that person who's guarding that oil refinery is competent or not? How would we know whether he or she is perhaps even a terrorist? How would we know? Well, the answer is we might know, but we might not. If this facility is located in a state that has elected under a 2004 law to get access to FBI database background checks, and if the employer in that state has elected to gain access to that information, and if that employer has chosen to use that information to bar or otherwise limit employment for a person who doesn't pass the background check, if all three of those qualifications are met, then we can be sure, if the information is accurate, we can be sure that the person working guarding that hazardous waste plant or chemical plant is not a terrorist and ought to be there. There are too many ifs in that equation as far as I'm concerned. I think that in order to protect the public, we need to know certainly that the people to whom we are entrusting this important responsibility are qualified, competent, and safe, as a huge majority of those in that field are already doing. So how do we reach the point where we have that 100-degree certainty, or as close as we can get to 100%? There are many issues that are raised by the legislation in front of us. The purpose of this hearing is to begin the process of evaluating those issues and improving the legislation that is in front of us. Here's some questions that come to mind. Is it necessary to have a requirement that states either have background check standards that meet a federal standard or give way to a federal background check process? Is it necessary or not? We'll have one witness, very qualified witness, who will testify that we should wait for states to catch up. I think we'll have other witnesses who will testify to the contrary. Next question. How can we be sure that the information that's being conveyed is accurate? That's a very important question. We certainly do not want a situation where someone is denied a job or a promotion or some other employment opportunity because they are inaccurately identified as someone who is a problem. Another important question about privacy. Once an employer has access to information about someone's background, how can we be sure that the employer will only use that information in a legitimate and appropriate way, and not in a way that will unfairly or unduly harm that employee? Very important question. Then finally, there's a question of whether or not employers who have access to the background check information should be compelled to use it or simply given the discretion as to whether or not to use it. And there are two views on that subject as well. I'm pretty confident that there is universal agreement on the proposition that we want the best system in place we can to assure that private employees who are responsible for guarding the critical infrastructure of this country are worthy of that responsibility. I don't think there would be much disagreement about that at all, if any disagreement. I'm sure there will be disagreement on the panels today about the best way to accomplish that objective. I have a set of ideas, but there are a set of ideas that are subject to criticism and evaluation to make the underlying bill better. Again, the goal here is that we reach a point where we can say with a high degree of confidence to our constituents that the person who is guarding that radioactive waste dump, who's an employee of a private security firm, is safe and qualified and going to do his or her job, so that someone's not going to steal the contents of that waste dump and make a dirty bomb that would put the community at risk. This is a very important issue. It's one that the Congress has acted on in 2004 that I think we need to reconsider and review in this context, and I'm very pleased that we have some very distinguished ladies and gentlemen who are going to help us sift through this issue here today.